Gary.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. So, yes, I'm Gary Ford. I'm the co-author of The Accidental Sexist, of which I guess everyone is now either perhaps the proud or perhaps reluctant owner of a copy. I'm also the co-founder of Men for Inclusion. Study after study has shown how more equal, more inclusive organizations where there's true equality of opportunity benefit everyone. They benefit individuals, they benefit the teams they work in, they benefit the organizations, they benefit the communities in which those organizations sit. And those benefits range from better financial performance, greater levels of innovation, better products, happier people, happier staff, more motivated teams. And that's just to name a few. But actually achieving that equality opportunity feels really, really difficult. It's over 50 years since we introduced equal opportunity legislation in the UK, yet now, 2022, 70%, around that number, of senior positions of companies in the UK are held by white men. So this change, we've been at it for years and not a lot's changing. And some of the things that we think contribute to that, particularly when it comes to gender, is this idea of accidental sexism. And we think that's one of the barriers that are holding people up. Now, we all exhibit some form of accidental sexism. We can't help it. It's set by the deeply ingrained social condition that we all have around thinking in very gendered ways. We don't do it deliberately. We can't help ourselves. Men do it, women do it. Men are affected by it, women are affected by it. But, the research will show that it affects the careers of women far more than it affects the careers of men. So what does accidental sexism actually look like? I'm going to try and illustrate this tonight using a bit of a light-hearted sports-related theme. So sports fans, I'm going to introduce you to, if this works, thank you, the Accidental Sexist First 11, just to illustrate this. Now, before I introduce you to the team, I would like to just point out at this point that as a man, there is a risk that this will come across to the women in the audience as me mansplaining your own oppression to you. If that's how it comes across, I do apologize. And if you'd like to come and talk to me afterwards and maybe explain how it made you feel, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. We all make mistakes, so I'll make that point again. So let's have a look at the team, and as an indication of how this might play out in the workplace. So in goal, we've got high-profile opportunity. This is a man. It's a mixed gender team, by the way. And the way this plays out in terms of accidental sexism is because we think in very gendered ways around the roles and the things that people do, we are more likely to associate leadership, career ambition, career need with men more than women. And we end up therefore we're more likely to give men the really high-profile opportunities that really turbocharge their careers. We are more likely to do that than we are for the women in our organizations. Now, I would like to also say at this point that this is based on research that Jill did in a 3-year study at Cambridge University on the impact of, across 25 organizations, 7,000 managers, about how this impacted the careers of men and women in organizations. And it echoed, if you read the book, the experience that Stephen and I had when we worked on a male allies program at JP Morgan. So this is rooted in some good research. I'd love to make that clear. So anyway, let me introduce the rest of the team. We're going to move on to the back four now. At right back, we've got non-core admin. This is a woman. And again, it goes back to these gendered views about roles we think women are suitable for. So we think of women as being very conscientious, good at attention for detail, people, they're good at collaboration. And therefore, one of the things that ends up happening is we tend to give women more of the non-core job admin. This is not people that are doing an admin role. Often it's people in quite senior roles, but the women still end up being asked to take the minutes, organize the leave and do. So you can see that works because we have these kind of ingrained beliefs. If we go across the rest of the back four, we've got promoted on potential. Again, it's a man. It's far more likely that we promote men based on some view that they've got potential leadership ability, whereas women, we have to work far harder and we're more likely to promote them if they've demonstrated competence as opposed to future potential. You can see that also in the center of the defense, we've got assumptions due to family. And this is the very simple thing that we make assumptions that when women have young children, they don't want to do those challenging stretch projects. They don't want to travel. They don't want to work extra hours. Now, that may be true they don't, but we don't even have the conversation. We don't even ask them. And then also we found in our research that women tend to get a lot less direct feedback from managers. Perhaps it's because their male managers are a little bit scared of how the women might react if they were very direct with that feedback. But it ends up they get things like, oh, you need to show more gravitas. And it's very difficult to do something with feedback like that. Let's move on to the midfield now. So the next part of our research shows that women tend to get less airtime in meetings. They tend to have their voices overridden. It's kind of hard to get their voices into the conversation in the first place. In the center of midfield, we've got the he-Peter. You can picture this guy already, can't you? Sort of like curly hair, moustache, tight, shorts too tight, you know, the sort of guy, right? And the he-Peter is a well-known phenomenon where you're in a group situation, a woman suggests an idea, everybody ignores her. 10 minutes later, the man says exactly the same idea. Everyone goes, that's brilliant, John, we'll do that. Right? Again, a well-researched phenomenon. We also got on the left-hand side of midfield, no senior sponsors. Now, the way this tends to play out, and it's connected with the left winger, which I'll show you in a minute, but this idea that because we are more likely to make social bonds with the people like us, many organizations end up with social groups based around gender lines. And therefore, those social groups end up creating some of those opportunities that don't go through the normal promotion or hiring channels. We end up giving people opportunities simply because we have a social relationship with them. And because of these deeply gendered thinking, those things are more likely to happen in groups of men from which women are excluded. And therefore, women often end up without some of that senior sponsorship that men have obtained probably through a social network more than by executing their job well. As I say, in the attack, a left-wing partnership there, the old boys network. Clearly, that doesn't happen in any of the companies that are based here, I'm sure. But often, quite frequently in the companies we work with, we find women often talk about the fact there's a bit of an old boys network happening. In the center of the attack, we've got punish more harshly. This is research shows that women often, particularly when they get into senior leadership positions, are judged on their gender, not on their ability as an individual. And therefore, their mistakes are jumped upon far more than perhaps their male colleagues might have the same mistakes highlighted. And then finally, there's this issue where women are often thought to owe their position to some sort of quota. We have to promote more women, we have to hire more women. So therefore, people think that they've only got the job because they're a woman. And then finally, the manager, Big Ron interrupter. I'm sure you can picture Big Ron as well. And this is down to the evidence that women are interrupted far more in social situations than men. So how did the accidental first 11 get on? Not good. Went down to a pretty staggering 9-1 defeat in their first game. Now, this is based on the very controversial FTSE 100 CEO counting method. It's a bit like Duckworth-Lewis, but not quite as fair. This is based on the fact if you went and looked at the current FTSE 100 CEOs, there are clearly 100, 94 of them are men, 6 are women. To my knowledge, none of them identify as anything other than male or female, but my level of research didn't kind of extend quite that far. Now, the more mathematically minded amongst you will work out that that's not a 9-to-1 ratio. It's actually a 15-to-1 ratio. I thought 15-to-1 isn't a reasonable kind of expectation of a football score. Some of you might think 9-1's not really a reasonable expectation of a football score until you realise I'm a Southampton fan. 9-1 is a moral victory where I come from. Now, the good news is, in our second game with the accidental sexist 11, they managed a creditable 5-all draw, so sort of fought back. This is using the gender pay gap closure method, where it's based around whether men and women have equal salaries for doing exactly the same job. And you can see the team got a draw, so men and women are paid the same. A slight problem, that result's been beamed back for us from the year 2151, which is when it's currently scheduled to happen. So you can see from this somewhat laboured metaphor that it's not all over. There's certainly some work for us all to do. And obviously this example is along gender lines, but we know that there are similar challenges around other characteristics, race, disability, sexuality, neurodiversity, all sorts of challenges that are very similar in nature. So at Men for Inclusion, we kind of feel that the only way to solve this is to get everyone involved. We all benefit from better inclusion in our organisations. It's upon all of us to start doing the work. And what we try to do is encourage those that maybe have been reluctant or absent from these types of conversations and this type of work, and try to encourage them to join in. This is not about how we help women, how we support women. This is about there are multiple genders. We all benefit from this work. We all have to pitch in and do our bit. This is about all of us working together. So let me show you an example of this. This is the Men for Inclusion average company. And you can see we've broken this company down into a number of different groups. And I'd like to make clear, I'm sure this is not like your company, but it's just an imaginary Men for Inclusion average company. We got a number of people, a number of men, so 500 employees, 300 men, 200 women, and our estimation, rightly or wrongly, actually I have to confess, there's no research on this one. We just made this up a bit based around some experience. That perhaps as many as 30% of the women are involved in some way, involved in trying to make their organisation more inclusive, more respectful of women, creating more equal opportunities. And maybe 30% is overestimating it. Don't know. When it comes to the men, 2%. Maybe I'm underestimating that. But they're not doing anywhere near this level of work. Maybe you've got a dedicated D&I leader, organisation of 500 people. And, assuming how much effort they can put in, these are all busy people. Maybe they put in 15 minutes of work a week on average, perhaps. Organising the gender event, taking part in this, on average 15 minutes a week. I don't know, maybe it's an estimate. Of which probably 80% of that's discretionary. They're doing it side of the desk, they're doing it after work, they're doing it during their lunchtime. We think that equates to something like just over 0.25% of the company's total efforts. That's the challenge. That's why it's going to take us to year 2151. So we think, this is when I turn to a political party broadcast or something, not a good time to be doing this, after today perhaps. What we want to do is take some of that blue and turn it to green. And if we turn some of that blue to green, and maybe some of this purple down the bottom also change to green, we begin to get more people involved, more people engaged in making this difference, to making a change. So how do we do this? And I think it does start with awareness. And what I mean by that, this is trying to make sure that we've all got a true understanding of the lived experience of the people we work alongside. And also how we work and the work that happens, how the exciting work is divided up. Who does the admin? Who gets the opportunities? How compensations work? How social groups are defined and kind of allowed to integrate. Often it's about making things that have traditionally been very invisible, visible. And sometimes it's about the unwritten rules of the organisation and how they play out when people don't realise they're there. And by the way, Mark, Jill, Stephen and I have done a lot of work with a lot of companies. They all have this challenge. If you're thinking your company has this challenge, I'm not saying they do, but you're not unique if that's the case. So secondly, and this is classic organisational change management stuff, if you're familiar with it, we need to move those people with some awareness into desire. We need them to want to change. Now, a lot of this, I think, or we think, is about giving people space, giving them space to think about their experience, to think about the organisation they want to work in, the environment that they work in, the culture they want to be part of. And this is not without any judgment. It's not without trying to make people feel guilty. It's about asking people what is their experience, what is the type of organisation you want to work with, what's the type of team you want to work with. But more importantly, recognise that this is hard. If it was easy, we would have solved it years ago. And therefore, we will all make mistakes in doing it. right? And part of it is creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes, because we will still get things wrong. I've already owned up to it. I've probably got 100 things wrong already just in the last 10 minutes. Come and tell me. Let's make those conversations more open, more trusting. We don't judge people. We don't criticize people. We just say, look, you made a bit of a mistake there. And you say, sorry, I'll try and do better next time. I didn't mean to. And then finally, we want to get people to take definitive action. So at that point, I'm gonna stop, because actually the clock's telling me I'm nearly out of time. And actually, I kept the time better this time, dress rehearsal. I'm sure our brilliant panel will have some fantastic ideas of some of the actions you can take. But also, as Ben mentioned, you've got a pack of cards. On that pack of cards, if you open it, don't open it yet, there are 52 top tips of practical actions you can do. We've also, as Ben mentioned, taken one card out. I think we've got roughly 100 cards. I'm hoping everyone's got a single card. And our networking event a bit later, we'll be asking people to see if they can match up their cards with the person that holds the same card as them in the room. So that's how we're going to try and do a bit of networking, trying to find the person with the matching card and maybe have a bit of a conversation on what's written on there and what it might mean to you, or maybe what it means at all. So that's me done. I'll now hand over to Ben and our brilliant panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.